have with us today Steve Sheppard, who is the founder of Sheppard Communications Group. Steve has over 25 years of experience in the telecommunications industry. He is an author and an educator. He's written numerous books and magazine articles on telecommunications topics, including convergence and VoIP. So with that, I will turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Suzanne, very much. Good morning, everyone. Actually, the experts couldn't make it, but I was hanging out in the lobby, and they asked me if I could come in and talk about voice over IP for a moment here. Let me give you some preliminary thoughts before I actually start talking about the technology per se. And it's really not a technology talk. We're really talking about implications of this stuff for you in the marketplace. The theme of this conference is convergence. And convergence is a fairly big deal today. You know, convergence first arrived back in about 1998, and when the bubble collapsed under the weight of its own ridiculousness, it took convergence with it. And it's now back, and this time it's back with a vengeance, and this time it's back to stay. Convergence is real. It's got huge amounts of money associated with it, and the opportunities that it presents for your community, what you do, under the guise of voice over IP, are fairly significant, less than routine, and rather perplexing to the customer base. I want to share a sort of an opportunity I had recently to see convergence at its best, because the theme that I'm going to present here is going to come up repeatedly during this seminar this morning. I do a lot of work outside the U.S. The bulk of my customers lie in the third world primarily. I do a lot of work in Africa, a lot of work in Southeast Asia, a lot of work in Latin America. I do about 70 countries a year. I have the opportunity to work on voice over IP implementations and convergence implementations with everyone from very, very large multinational corporations to very, very small village-level voice over IP implementations in northern Limpopo province in Africa, for example. In fact, I arrived yesterday from Brazil. Little recommendation for you. If you go to Brazil on Sunday, arriving Sunday morning, and your luggage doesn't arrive until Wednesday afternoon, be prepared for the fact that you've got two choices for clothing. You can either buy it in the sports store, in which case you look like Pele, which doesn't work in business situations, or you get to go to the Aramis store, which means you better have sold your car recently because you're going to need it to buy socks. So I now have a rather interesting collection of ill-fitting Brazilian clothing, if anybody's interested. I'm happy to share it with you. In January of this year, I was in South Africa, and I made a serious judgmental error. I was down there for several weeks, and over one of the weekends, I decided to go to one of these home electronics expos. It's one of those places where you walk in to the show floor, and you pick something up, and you look at it, and you go, I don't even know what this thing does, but I'm going to buy it because it's really cool. It's one of those places. Leave your wallets home, purses home, anything spendable, don't take it with you. So walking the show floor with my wife, and a fellow from Microsoft grabbed me and said, come in and see our IPTV demonstration. Okay. So I came in, sat down. One of the women in the booth came over, handed me a remote control, and said, find something you'd like to watch. So I started flipping channels until I came to an episode of Friends. I like Friends, let's watch Friends. So we're sitting there, and she's explaining to me about IP and how it works and how we've integrated things, and this is in fact a convergence phenomenon and so on. And as we're talking, that happened. A phone starts ringing. Thank you. A phone starts ringing. Timing could not be better. And what's interesting about this is that the phone, the dial, the ringtone is coming out of the television set, but it's not part of the show. And she said to me, are you going to answer that? I said, well, is it for me? She said, yes, it is. Answer the phone. So I answer the phone. The television show freezes as if I'd hit the pause button. I said, hello, and now I'm engaged in a voice-over IP conversation with somebody that's on the other side of the floor and talking about, again, integration and convergence and the advantages of this and so on. So we talked for a while, and then end call, so I click and end the call, and it's all over with. And then she asks me that question for which there is no correct answer. Have you seen this commercial that's on television here in the States right now where a young guy is in the shower, and he's washing his hair, I think, and his girlfriend or wife or whatever is outside the shower, she's brushing her teeth, and she suddenly pauses and she turns to him and says, if you could be with any one of my friends, which one would it be? Yeah, see, everybody's laughing, but notice it's the guys. And then she says, you can tell me I won't get mad. At which point he just freezes, because he knows from this point forward, no matter what he says, he's dead. Okay, so I kind of had that same question. A woman said to me, how do you like that sweater Jennifer Aniston is wearing? Now my wife, of course, is standing pretty much right there, and I hear her start to laugh, and the woman, sensing my consternation, finally says, pretend you're a woman. It's a beautiful cashmere, lovely sweater. Yeah, very, very nice. She says, how would you like to buy it? I said, sure. She says, okay, just follow the sweater with the little mouse ball on the remote, and when you get anywhere over the sweater, just click. So I did that, click, show freezes again, and up comes the LL Bean website on that sweater. At which point my wife said, cool. Okay, so you realize what we're talking about here is 3 IP-based applications, none of which are magical, none of which on their own are anything particularly new, special, different. But the combination of the 3 together present opportunities that we haven't begun to even think about. Most notably, things like advertising. You know, it bothers me no end at night when I watch Law and Order. When the commercials come on, I have to sit there and watch a never-ending stream of commercials that are talking to me about various methodologies, drugs, and substances that I can take to improve the functionality of the various parts of my body that apparently are failing. I don't need those yet, and adult diapers just don't do much for me yet, so why do I have to watch this? I do a lot of photography. I'd like to see Nikon ads. I'd like to see ads for accessories to my cameras. I'd like to see information about what I want to see. We now have the ability to do that. The reason I'm telling you this story, folks, is the community out there that you serve is a bit confused, and for good reason. You think about it, everything that we have made available to them in the form of telecommunications-based services for the last 100 years or so, we're changing. And you all know the story, 1876, right? Alexander Graham Bell reportedly spills a beaker of hydrochloric acid into his lap, causing him to say, come here, Watson, I need you. I submit to you that's probably not what he said, and you probably didn't need a telephone, rudimentary though it was, to hear him. For 100 years, we've delivered voice the same way. For 50 years, we've delivered television the same way. We've delivered internet access and web-based services for 10 or 15 years the same way, and now we're going to change it all. And we expect the customers to just go, okay, that's fine. Not a good idea. You have an opportunity here to be much more than what the customers are expecting. And what I'm referring to here is the ability to be truly consultative in your work with them. They need a lot of help. What we're offering them in the form of voice over IP and related products and services are not magical. They're not all that special from a technological point of view. But the opportunities they present to you and the differences they will make for the customer are enormous. And so it lies on your shoulders to sort of accept this mantle of responsibility for being much more consultative in very different consultative ways than you ever have. So that's not a criticism by any stretch of the imagination. I'm telling you this because the customers out there who I deal with all the time are saying to me, we need more. We understand the technology, we get that, but what do we do with it? So if you can help paint them that picture, if you can help create that vision of what could be, you win the leadership game. And that's why you're here this morning. That's what I want to try to give you a little bit of information about. My message is very simple. I want to talk to you about voice over IP from a services point of view. I want to talk to you a little bit about convergence and its implications. I want to talk to you about the various ways in which we can deliver voice to the customers that you serve. We'll talk about some of the advantages, the challenges, which translate into opportunities for you, and talk a little bit later on about the business case that this whole opportunity that's emerging presents. Convergence is sort of an interesting phenomenon today because we have 3 different worlds that are bashing against one another. We have the convergence of the media space, the convergence of the technology space, and the convergence of the telecommunications space. Historically, it has been remarkably easy to see the difference between these 3 worlds. It's becoming far less easy. I would ask you, for example, Apple Computer. Are they a technology company or a media company? The answer, of course, is yep. Right? not a bad thing by any means. However, understanding that these three are becoming one, in fact, I've actually coined the word telemediology. It seems to capture it all pretty well. I even bought telemediology.com because I'm flaky, as you can tell. Anyway, the point is that you're going to get a lot of questions about this because companies are going to be or customers rather, are going to be a little confused about who do I buy from? Do I buy from a technology company? Do I buy from a telecom company? And the answer is you buy from the service provider that's going to give you what you need. And this is where the opportunity for the consultative sell really becomes extraordinarily important. Customers get a little confused about this. I'm not going to talk to you about packet switching and circuit switching and all that nonsense. I'm going to talk to you about pots versus pans. Well, see, I wouldn't be doing my job if you didn't learn a new acronym this morning. I mean, plain old telephone service, or POTS, is the traditional, what everybody knows, circuit switch, nothing wrong with it, does what it was designed to do, legacy voice service. Great. PANS, which is pretty amazing new stuff, is where voice over IP falls. Okay? Voice over IP is great. I mean, it's a good service. It's been around a while now. It's relatively mature. It relies on a packet-switched environment rather than a circuit-switched environment, and therefore has all of the advantages of packet and all of the disadvantages of packet. And again, this is where the consultative stuff really becomes important. We have a variety of options. We can do voice over IP directly over the internet if we like. Does it work? Of course it works. Is it predictable? No, it's not predictable. Does that make it bad? No, that makes it unpredictable. And therefore, is it an ideal option for business calls? No, it's not. On the other hand, we have a variety of options that give us the ability to use all of the advantages of voice over IP, but delivered over a much more controlled, much more controllable network environment, which means that the service quality is frankly indistinguishable from traditional circuit-switched voice and has the advantages that come from a packet environment that allow us to integrate all these services to do the kind of things that I saw in South Africa. The critical point here is this last one. And this is a question that comes up repeatedly. I apologize. I know some of you can't see it in the back, so I'll just tell it to you. The most important point is the service is voice. It's not voice over IP. Customers don't get excited because there's a stream of packets coming out of the telephone. They get excited because they've got good quality voice that can be integrated with other services to do something more than just a phone call. Okay? It doesn't matter what the underlying technology is. What matters is what the customer receives. And if the customer receives voice over IP as part of a services package that does those four magical things that cause them to sit up and pay attention, you've done your job. They're real simple. You ready? If I buy this service, if I go voice over IP, if I allow you to come in and help me evolve my business to a VoIP environment, is it going to raise my revenues? Is it going to reduce my costs? Is it going to either stabilize or improve my competitive position? And finally, is it going to mitigate the risk that I face operating in a competitive environment? And the answer to all four of those is, if done properly, and this is where you come in, the answer is absolutely yes. That's the kind of thing that customers care about. Far too many businesses out there that have this technology are trying to sell it on the merits of the fact that it's a packet environment. It doesn't matter. What matters is the service, and that's the message that customers need to hear. Now, who's using it? Well, pretty much everybody. Obviously individuals, because individual users using things like Skype and so on are the ones that get a lot of press and attention, and it's sort of a viral sell. But we're not talking about individuals here. We're talking about businesses, particularly small businesses. And the opportunities, the advantages that come to them from this technology are legion. Telecommuters obviously benefit from it. We'll talk more about these later on. Virtual workers. That's not what it sounds like. That sounds like you're padding the payroll. What I mean by virtual workers is that these are the people who have the opportunity to essentially be anywhere. Who has the largest call center in the world? Anybody know? JetBlue. JetBlue Airlines. And the funny thing is they don't have a call center. Their operators are all at home. And the advantages, if you think about that, are pretty staggering. The fact of the matter is that these virtual workers, the so-called mobile workforce, the home office, the small office, and so on, all benefit in very unique ways if you can make the sell with the voice over IP environment. And that's one of the messages we have to really keep. We talked about this as sort of being the Swiss Army knife of telecom. I probably just violated some brand by putting that in there, but that's okay. The point of that is, of course, that this is a technology that is remarkably adaptable. It can adapt to essentially any environment from a single user to the largest corporations. It can offer multiple capabilities, multiple services, multiple integrated functions, and that's where the advantages come. This is a classic example of the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That's the advantage of VoIP. The services that are part of the offering are sort of all over the map in terms of what they're capable of doing. And the nice thing about them is that they have the ability to evolve in almost a building block fashion as companies migrate from sort of entry-level use of the technology all the way through a full integration environment. And I've actually run this through with some of my clients in Africa, watching them go from simple sort of integrated voice and data over a single interface because it's easy and it's cheap and it works and it demonstrates the capability and therefore removes the sense of danger going to a new technology. And then all the way through as we go, for example, to a hosted IPVX environment where the customer has the opportunity to enjoy the benefits of PBX without having to buy one. It's a brilliant, brilliant opportunity. Managed I'm going to switch languages in a moment. IPPBX, where you have the opportunity to, in effect, give the same functionality, put a device on-prem, but manage it for the customer. Now, some of you are probably going to sit out there and say, you know, we don't, it's not our PBX, so why would we want to get involved in that? And the answer is the same answer that I'll give to many of the clients I've worked with outside the United States, and that is just because it's not your device doesn't mean they don't need management functionality. There are an awful lot of companies out there making an awful lot of money managing these services for PBXs that they don't own. The opportunity to come in and be a professional services provider for some of these companies is real. And if you're not considering it, if it's not part of your current purview, let me encourage you to consider it. And if you're interested, I'll give you my email. I'm happy to send you information about this. The folks at XO can talk to you about this. It's a big, big opportunity. Coming soon, indeed, are things like SIP trunks and things like MPLS, both of which are sort of the final evolutionary stages in the sort of maturation process of the corporations that go into the IP world. The SIP trunks basically give the customer very, very granular control over everything they're doing using a wide range of products and services, physical products and services as they request. The IP MPLS world gives us the ability to migrate to a 100% IP environment when the time is right and still be able to offer highly granular, highly predictable, and highly sellable quality of service levels for the customer base. So it's a very, very big deal. If you look at the typical small business, it sort of looks like this. You ever wonder why we draw clouds? I've been doing this since 1981, and I haven't seen a network yet that looks like that. Why do we draw clouds? You gotta ask.
Just showing what goes on inside.
Yeah, absolutely, right? We don't know what goes on in there. Let me clarify that. We don't want to know what goes on in there. Maybe that's an even better way to put it. And perhaps most important of all, it doesn't matter. In fact, the two most important words that you learn in this business are represented by this little line right here and these little lines right here. These are technical terms, but you might want to learn them, write them down, memorize them, because they're very much a part of the technological lexicon that you need to be able to study. This is called the Gazenta, and this is called the Gazauda. And what this is responsible for is making sure that the Gazauda matches the Gazenta. Done. That's about the level of technological prowess that customers want to hear from you. They may need to know more, but in order to sell the technology, to sell the product and service, that's pretty much it. The key here is that you have the ability with a small business environment to host the voice over IP service across a network that is optimized for doing it, that offers guaranteed service levels, guaranteed quality of service, and the ability to support private IP even though you may be leaving the network and connecting to the public switch network or to the internet. This is a nice thing about having a network that's optimized for this evolution. This is where you come in. This is where your skills and capabilities become very important because you have the ability to represent this advantage to those customers. Now, why should they buy? Well, the costs can be lower. We've sort of done ourselves a disservice in our industry by making free voice over IP available because therefore VoIP is free. Well, you get what you pay for. Okay? Free VoIP, I mean, I'll be the first to tell you. I use it myself. I don't call customers with it because of the unpredictability factor. I will not submit them to that. However, over time, and as you implement and create this sort of sophisticated migration path, the operating expenses and the capital expenses do indeed drop, and the advantages go up. You have a single connection for voice and data, which rapidly and dramatically simplifies the network and at the same time lowers the cost of running the network. Perhaps, in my mind, the greatest advantage you get is our sort of elimination or dramatic reduction of our old friend, the Mac. Moves, adds, changes, deletes. I wrote a book about voice over IP recently for McGraw-Hill. When they came to me and asked me to do the book, I said, no, I don't want to do that. They said, why not? I said, because there's 678 books about voice over IP on the market. Why would I write another one? And they sort of connived and wheedled and begged, and finally I said, all right, look, if you get a total control, I'll write the book. Well, that tends to stop editors in their tracks. Excuse me? Do what? I said, look, I'm a member of a board of trustees at a university up in Vermont where I live. We just completed a % voice over IP conversion. I said, if you'll let me write the book as a case study, because I'm not going to just talk about the lofty advantages. I'm going to also talk about some of the pitfalls. They said, fine, do it. I bring that up because in the process of writing the book and studying our network, I learned that this was perhaps the one thing that caused the IT people to just roll over and be overjoyed about the conversion. Their single biggest expense on a college campus, think about college campuses. College professors move around like ants on an anthill. They change offices every time the cycle of the moon changes. Right? The cost of doing the Mac stuff, of constantly updating the database and reassigning cable pairs as people move around the campus is extraordinarily high, requires people, accuracy issues, and cost. In the IP environment, that goes away because the identity of the device follows the device, not the cable pair. And therefore, if somebody disconnects their phone and moves and replugs it in, you're updated. It's a great thing. You get all the efficiencies of the unified network and, of course, reduced long distance and calling charges between offices as a result. From a productivity point of view, we have the ability to enable the remote workforce at a very, very low cost, giving people in the small office or the home office the same level of service that they enjoy when they're actually at the office. It's part of that virtual workforce concept. You get easier network management and the ability to deploy self-service portals so if the customer wants to make a service change, they get to make their own service change. I remember a lot of years ago, when 9X was still in existence, and 9X came out with a new product called Enterprise. Some of you may remember Enterprise if you were around. It was remarkable. They were getting all kinds of complaints from customers, big enterprise customers, that said, all we want to do is change the endpoint of a circuit from here to here. We have to go through a 3-day service order process. What is the big deal? And some brilliant person said, it isn't a big deal. Let's put a terminal on the customer's prem, give them access to the digital cross-connect that supports their services, and if they want to make a change, we'll give them limited access just to their circuits, and they can do it. This was the greatest example of Tom Sawyer technology I've ever seen in my life. Just for a second. The customer does all the work. The customer pays for the right to do all the work, and the customer perceives that they're getting enormously better customer service. It doesn't get any better than that. Well, you kind of have the same situation here with these self-service portals. It's easy to use. Reliability goes up. Security goes up to the level that you wish to implement. And, of course, you get all of these wonderful features and functions and so on. We implemented at the college using phones that had little web screens on them. And one of the first times we had the opportunity to use the web screens occurred when ice, we get a lot of ice in Vermont. Well, they sell T-shirts up there that say Vermont seasons. It says 11 months of snow and 1 month of really bad skiing. That's pretty close to accurate. Water pipe broke in the server room, and the water was rising at 4 inches a minute, and the servers were not happy. And we had the opportunity to send out a broadcast to every phone on the network in very large letters that said, "Save yourselves, log off now, you get one chance," and nothing was lost. So that integrated data capability was a really great thing and became a major selling opportunity for the vendor. Application integration, database integration, this is huge. Screen pops, and of course support for multiple IP devices. One of the things we're starting to now see appearing in the web, Google is one of the first to implement this, is a situation or an environment where if you pay Google enough money, they'll put a little logo on when your company comes up, and it's a phone. And if you click on that phone, they'll allow you to set up a telephone call, voice over IP phone call to an agent at that company. So imagine now the ability, somebody's looking for a service that one of your customers offers. Right? And when it comes up on Google, we can click on an icon and I can now talk over voice over IP through Google over the internet to an agent who can help me with person-to-person communications. This is a big, big advantage. So between cost savings, productivity, and of course application integration, we get some real advantages. Organization-wide use of the impact and power of this stuff. We get this virtual presence as well as this click-through concept of what I was just describing to you. We can support a variety of different office types and locations, and we can support both what I like to call building warriors and road warriors. Building warriors are the people who work in environments, for example, where hoteling is practiced. Hoteling is where no one really has a dedicated office. You come into the building, and they assign you an office, and when you plug in your phone number works, and everything is in good shape. And of course, the road warriors who know what that is. Supply chain is one of the areas that benefits the most here simply because of the ability to integrate everyone throughout the supply chain using all of the various applications that innervate the supply chain. Voice over IP is one of the functions that allows us to integrate data across the supply chain to guarantee that everyone gets the same information at exactly the same time. These are selling points, folks. There's nothing magic about any of them. But part of this migration to voice over IP involves getting the customer to think more about what could be, not what is. And these are the sorts of things that pop up when that discussion begins. There's a phenomenon going on called IMS. Right? And I talk a lot about IMS. I wrote a book about IMS about 2 months ago. And what I've come to realize is that if we had 31 people in a room and asked them what IMS is, you get 31 different answers. IMS, in my mind, is probably the single most important technological phenomenon we have seen in our industry in the last 50 years, with the exception of just the arrival of the IP protocol. The trouble is, the acronym is meaningless. I often have people in the audience who say, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Could you expand the acronym so I know what IMS is? It'll help me. I said, yeah, let me help you with that. It's IP Multimedia Subsystem. Do you feel better now? You know, it doesn't mean anything. IMS is the ultimate goal. IMS is convergence at its best. IMS is services delivered to the customer on the customer's terms, regardless of device, regardless of access modality, and regardless of location. It is that which will enable mobile IP. It is the ultimate end state that we want to achieve. I have this slide up here because about 2 weeks ago, Verizon Wireless pulled together what has now come to be known as the Gang of Five. These 5 vendors, Cisco, Lucent, Motorola, Nortel, and Qualcomm, and said it's high time that we came up with a set of recommendations and standards, de facto standards, that will give everyone in the industry some idea of how to move forward with voice over IP, with IMS, with all of the integrated IP capabilities that are here. I mention this not because you need to run out and suddenly become familiar with advances to IMS, but because you need to be aware that you're going to be hearing about IMS, and if you're not familiar with it now, you soon will have to be. So another offer, again, if you don't know about this, send me an email. I'll send you white papers on it. There's a lot of stuff out there, and it's really, really very important. This is the first step toward true, universal, unified communications in the marketplace. So in its simplest form, unified communication is, again, no magic. It's doing all of this over a single interface. Why do we care? Because it gives us the ability to touch the customer in a variety of ways instantaneously. It means that the customer has access to one interface, one human interface, for all of these capabilities if we desire to give them that. It means that everything goes to the common single mailbox. I still remember being wowed when Avaya, back around 99 or 2000, announced that you could now turn on your PC and listen to your voicemail messages on your PC. That was so cool. And now we look at that and go, yeah, so what? Well, the so what is that was the first step toward this kind of convergence. Think of the possibilities here in terms of enabling advanced competition, more accelerated impact in the market, and the ability to touch the customer in different ways. This is what they need to hear. Now, cost components, of course. It ain't free, number one. Right? There will be some hardware and software involved here. All right? The only thing worse than not going to voice over IP is going to voice over IP without first preparing the network and preparing the organization. Okay? It's a data conversion. The myth that says VoIP is just one more data application on the network is a myth. Yes, it is a data application because now it's just going to be a bunch of packets flowing across the network. However, the demands that it places on the network are extraordinarily high. A couple of bursts of email are one thing. A continued high-quality voice conversation is something entirely different. And if your network isn't prepared for that, you're going to rapidly get yourselves into trouble. Not you, but the customer. IP phones and soft phones run the gamut from very, very simple to unbelievably complex, and customers don't know that. They need to understand this better. The upgrades required for QoS, another myth, says if you've got enough bandwidth in the access pipe, voice over IP means no problem with quality of service. Nonsense. The access pipe is only one area where problems can occur. Customers don't know that. They need help to understand that. There are labor and professional services, support and administrative labor that may change, and of course contracts, training, and user impacts, not to mention the potential need to write down or write off some assets. Just things to be considered. It doesn't mean that they will all occur. It means they may come up in the conversation and you should be sort of ready to address them or to deal with them or talk about them. What are the opportunities? Well, here's one. All morning we've been talking about this. You can guarantee quality of service. That's a relatively easy thing to do. Partner with your network provider, XO for example, and you end up with a situation where what you now have is a high-quality network. All right? But think about the enhanced capabilities that you now enable through the convergence of all the different applications we're talking about. You have the ability to offer a wide range of services. It's funny, when I talk to the customers out there, one of the things that they feel the least comfortable with is the degree to which they, as people operating in this environment, have been prepared to operate in this environment. In other words, training. As trivial as it sounds, one of the least provided things that the customers are clamoring for out there is training to a level where they feel comfortable. It's an enormous opportunity, not so much because training is such an incredibly lucrative business, but because it gives you the ability to become that much more intimate with the customer and to cause them to be that much more dependent on you. Wiring and power. It's a packet environment. Packets don't transport power, which means that you've got to deliver power to the sets. And if you're doing this over an Ethernet environment, you may have a problem because while Ethernet gives you the ability to deliver power over one of the pairs of wire that are in the interface, and that's as technical as I'm going to go right now, it's something that has to be considered. There may be some wiring issues you have to deal with. The college that we converted has buildings that serve as dorms that were built in the 1840s. They didn't have Cat5 in the 1840s, and therefore we had to do some pretty significant rewiring to get the building to work. Database updates, application integration, and of course our old friend E911, that's something that we have to consider. I've been a voice over IP user for a long time. I've got accounts with a number of different providers. Because I write and talk about it, I need to be able to speak intelligently about it. Vonage, for example. Vonage, you know, got in trouble a couple of years ago in Texas because of 911 problems. Well, I travel all the time. I use Vonage when I'm on the road. And I guarantee you that if I'm in Johannesburg and I call 911, you know, Vermont's not going to dispatch an ambulance. I'm sorry, it's just not worthwhile. Okay, so the answer is with that solution is you call them and tell them where you're going to be. Yeah, that's going to help, but that means compliance. The point is that there are solutions now out there, as you all know, for 911, but this is an area that has a very high emotional value attached to it. The customers are going to hit you hard on that. So be prepared to discuss what the options are. And the fact that just because it's voice over IP doesn't mean it's 911, but it's not 911 compliant. It's very compliant if it's implemented that way. That's not a problem, but be prepared to discuss it. So what are the conclusions? Number one, this is not an optional exercise. Voice over IP is here to stay, and it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Migrating when the time is right is a very smart thing. I talk a lot about what I call the Jurassic Park effect. The Jurassic Park effect, if you all saw the movie, you remember the scene where they've seen the dinosaurs for the first time, and they're all very impressed, except for Jeff Goldblum, the chaos theory guy, obviously a telecom guy. But somewhere in that discussion over lunch, that's Chilean sea bass, I seem to recall. I've seen the movie a few times. They're sitting there eating, and Goldblum is troubled. And the man that founded the park, Richard Attenborough, says, "What's the matter with you? What's the matter with you? We created dinosaurs. We spared no expense." And Goldblum says, yes, but you spent so much time and money proving that you could, you forgot to ask whether you should. And we know they shouldn't because there were 2 sequels, but that's not the point. The point is that going to voice over IP is a good thing. But you've got to ask the right questions. You've got to help the customer understand why the advantages are there, because a poorly implemented voice over IP conversion is far worse than no conversion at all. Again, we're back to the consultative value that you bring. Okay, this is what you do best. It's why you're out there. The opportunities are growing at a rapid rate as this grows at a rapid rate. It means that they have to understand that it's much more than just telephony, that it represents a sea change in the way services are delivered, and it represents the fact that this is really what the agent channel partner community was created to do. It was critical that you think about that. EXO, the sponsor of this particular part of the show, has been in this game a long time. I hear that, like when I first started talking to EXO about this, one of the things I mentioned was that while working in South Africa, of all places, it's not on there. But they know about it. They talk about EXO because of EXO's management of the network and the fact that they carry 1 billion minutes a month of VoIP traffic. That's a lot of traffic. The point is, look, they're not the only game in town, but they know what they're doing. They've got a lot of experience in this stuff, and I would recommend that you pay attention to what they're doing and look at the options that they have as you talk to the customers that you're trying to enable with a voice over IP solution. So with that, I'll shut up, leave this confusing slide up on the wall, and ask if you have any questions. By the way, I'm not going anywhere, so if you have questions after the fact, this is delivery by fire hose. I will certainly answer them when we're done here.